The airline industry post-COVID is characterised by deteriorating service, long queues at airports and extraordinarily high prices. But at the heart of the problem, for travellers at least, is a lack of seat capacity and competition between airlines. In Australia, Business Weekend understands Qantas has 20 aircraft on standby as a contingency in case there's another COVID outbreak. Coincidentally, one of its chief rivals, Qatar Airways, wants to double its current flights into Australia. That's 21 flights a week. And that's being fiercely opposed by Qantas, as were revealed exclusively on Sky News earlier this week. To get to the heart of this corporate battle, let's go to Doha and speak with the Chief Executive of Qatar Airways, His Excellency Akbar Al Barker. Akbar, many thanks for your time. Can I just start by asking, have you applied to the Australian government formally to try and get these extra 21 flights?
Yes, Ross, we have. And we are waiting to have bilateral air services negotiations with the Government of Australia.
So in that regard, if you did get those flights, where would they go to? Would they be adding on to existing routes, or would you try and bring new routes on as well?
Yes, as a matter of fact, our air services agreement only allows us to go to three main gateways in Australia, which is Perth, Sydney and Melbourne. We also operate to Adelaide, and we had added the Brisbane during the pandemic. We would like to serve additional frequencies to the same gateways, and of course look at opportunities that we will get to other cities in Australia to connect the Australian people to the very large network of Qatar Airways.
OK, so Qantas argues that if a state-sponsored airline such as Qatar was allowed to expand its services into Australia, that this could risk Australian jobs. How do you respond to that?
No, it's quite the contrary. First and foremost, let me put the record straight. We connected Australian people to the world during the most difficult period in aviation history. We continued uninterrupted at the peak of the COVID, serving the three main points in Australia, which is Sydney, Perth and Melbourne. We also added, during the pandemic, Brisbane to the network. We kept Australian people connected. We made sure that at huge losses that we continue serving the Australian people and the Australian trade during this difficult period. What is interesting to know that we, the largest operator in Australia, as a matter of fact, completely stopped operating out of Australia, whilst we, at huge losses, continued. In April of 2020, we carried 36% of all the arrivals into Australia. We, as a matter of carried 1 in every 5 Australians into Australia. So you can see our commitment to Australia. What is happening at the moment and why we are being stifled from getting additional rights into Australia is the largest operator in Australia has cut its flight to 50% of pre-COVID level, more than double the price of the fares to the Australian people in the benefit of the shareholders. In addition, getting billions of dollars of state aid during the pandemic period in 20 and 21. And at the same time, even their large international partner has also cut flights to only 50% to pre-COVID levels, whilst we are offering an alternative to the Australian people, who we always like to serve, and to make sure that they are well connected internationally. We have done a lot of other things for Australia. We did repatriation flights. We carried Australians back to home, and vice versa, carried the stranded people in Australia back to their homes, with the charter flights to India to bring Australians back, with the charter flights to Kabul, risking our crew and our aircraft to repatriate people from Afghanistan. We have done a lot. We were the only airline that did major charter flights during the Australia Open in 2021. So you can see how committed we are. We are always there for people in good times and in bad times. We don't walk away. And the reason we are being challenged to get additional traffic rights so that they can put prices at high, reduce capacity, and really take the passengers with their fares to cleaners.
OK, can I ask you, would you give assurances that fares would come down to travellers if you were given this extra capacity?
Our fares are already very reasonable. What we don't want to do is to increase fares to levels that will make Australians unaffordable to travel outside Australia and bring large tourists into Australia that in such a high demand as a destination.
So do you imagine, because I know, say, for example, you've done a deal with Virgin in Australia. You've been previously part of the One World Alliance, which included Qantas. You've now included Virgin into your thing. Do you imagine that this might have also added to some of the friction between Qantas and Qatar Airways?
Look, I don't want to get involved into politics between airlines in Australia. What is very important, Ross, for me to tell you is that as part of One World, Qantas should be working with us, not with other airlines, in the spirit of the alliance. However, as they are working with a competitor of mine, I have the full right to work with another airline in Australia to develop our relationship and to serve the Australian people and the people who are members and working together with Virgin Australia. Why should I not work with their competitor when they are ready to work with my competitor?
So the timing of this is interesting, given, of course, the World Cup in Qatar that's coming up. And, of course, many people are seeking to come to your country during this time. So do you think, again, the timing of this corresponds with that?
Well, we have been applying to the Australian authorities for a long time to get additional rights. And continuously, our application has been blocked. I hope this time the government in Australia realizes the commitment of Qatar Airways at difficult times. We had even opened a help desk to help diplomatic missions around the world during COVID, Australian diplomatic missions, in order to help the Australian people. We are very committed to people. We are not there just, with us, it's not a one-way street. We are there, and we will always be there, like we have proved ourselves. When everybody stopped to Australia, we were there.
OK, so were you disappointed this week about the Australian Socceroos speaking out about the human rights record of your country, given the fact that your airline and its reputation also corresponds with the reputation of your nation?
Look, let us not mix two things. First and foremost, Qatar has done so much in order to meet all the international requirements. And frankly speaking, these people who are acting against my country because they cannot accept that a small nation like Qatar has won the largest football tournament in the world. And I think all this being said against my country, the mudslinging against my country, is nothing more than just nonsense. International regulators, International Labour Organization, every single entity abroad have certified that Qatar has met all the requirements, and every country will have here and there certain issues, but we should not take it out of context.
Do you think those footballers had a right, given the fact they're going to be visitors to your country, had a right to speak in the way in which they did?
Australia is a democracy. Every single Australian is free to reflect their opinion, but the fact should be seen and judged. And we welcome the Australian football team here in Qatar. For themselves, they will see the sacrifices we have made, and we assure them that it will be an experience they have never had before anywhere else in the world.
One other issue, in October 2020, 5 women claimed that they were, without their consent, intimately examined by officials from Qatar, now suing your airline. Again, reputational issues are important for people visiting your country, people using your airline. How do you respond to that?
Ross, what happened was during tragic circumstances when there was an attempted murder of an infant. Unfortunately, I cannot get into it, as you just said that they are taking me to court. So I don't want to preempt any statement, and I will leave it, and I trust the Australian justice system, and we will have to wait to see this go through the courts in Australia if this is what is going to happen.
Your Excellency, many thanks for speaking with us today. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Ross.